In this lesson, we'll finish rigging the fingers. We'll start by creating a set of attribute holders on every control. So that's pretty straightforward. We can start with the thumb. We'll add our attribute holder, and we know it'll be renamed to extra controls. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue that for the other control objects. I'll pause the video. Okay, so every control should now have its own attribute holder. It's time to create custom attributes. So for all controls except for the thumb, we'll have a set of 4 custom attributes because we'll need control over our metacarpal. So we will be controlling the bend and spread axes of each metacarpal bone. We'll control the bend axis of our mid and end sections. And then for the secondary bone objects here, the larger bones, I'll go ahead and show you how we'll connect into that. The goal is to hold volume so that when we're ready to skin, we'll get some really nice looking deformations and no collapsing. Alright, so let's go ahead and start to create these custom parameters. We'll start with the thumb. Let's grab our parameter editor. And the first will be named mid. And it will have a range of -360 and +360. That will be the same range for the other parameters. So we'll go ahead and choose add. Let's go ahead and create one more named end. Great. Now again, for the other controls, we'll have 2 more parameters. And we'll start with those extra parameters. So that's going to be meta bend. Remember that gets tied into the y-axis of our metacarpal bone. I'll go ahead and choose add. And the next will be meta spread. Great. And then the following 2 parameters will of course be mid and end. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue that for the other controls. And again, I'll pause the video. Alright, so once we're finished creating our custom parameters, it's time to do some wiring work. So we could always start with the pinky. So I'll simply go ahead and choose wire parameters. That's going to be modified object, extra controls, meta bend. We'll go ahead and tie into the metacarpal bone. And again, that's going to be the y-axis for our bend channel. We don't want to forget about our deg to rad function because we're tying a custom attribute to drive rotation. So let's go ahead and just copy that function because we'll be using it quite a bit, and we're ready to connect. Now notice we can get to the z-axis from the same object. So that's going to be meta spread right into the z-axis. Again, we'll paste our function in at our last parentheses at the end. I'll go ahead and choose connect. So if I were to just close this out, here's what we should start to see. Some really nice rotation from those root objects. Alright, great. Now when it comes to the other 2 channels, we're just tying into these smaller bone objects, and it'll be the y-axis. So that's really straightforward. I'll go ahead and leave that up to you. And pause the video. When I come back, I'll show you how to take care of the secondary bone objects. So let's go ahead and take care of that step and move on to the secondary bone so we could start to see how we're going to hold volume when we're ready to skin. Okay, so once we're done wiring into the main bone objects, here's what we should end up with. So I'll go ahead and show you that for the index finger. So I'll start to use the meta bend channel, the meta spread. Great, so we're getting some really nice control, and this should look wonderful when we're ready to skin. Now let's go ahead and take care of these secondary bone objects. And all we're doing is tying into their bend axis. So we're using the primary bone's rotation, and we're tying that right into the secondary bone object. So that's going to be the same for the thumb. And for the other fingers here, we're not going to hook in these secondary bones tied to our roots. Not just yet. That's going to be our last task. But let's go ahead and take care of the others. So just to kind of show you this, starting with the index finger, if I were to go ahead and grab the primary bone of the midsection, we'd simply choose wire parameters, and that's going to be transform rotation 0 Euler Y. And we'll tie that into the secondary bone's Y rotation. And it's a direct connection, no need for degrees to radians because we're tying into rotation. Alright, great. So here's what we should end up with. When we grab our control and start to move our channel, you'll notice that we have this additive rotation here. We have this really nice looking curl. And again, that's going to look beautiful when we skin between this bone and that one. Because now we have a way of holding volume so that the mesh doesn't collapse. That's the problem when skinning to just one finger bone. Alright, but now we have resolved that. So let's take care of that for the other mid and end sections. We don't want to forget about the thumb. And when I come back, we'll take care of the secondary bones tied to our roots. It's going to be another really fun topic. Okay, so again, as we start to use our mid and end parameters, we should be getting some really nice curls now. So it's now time to take care of these last bone objects here, these secondary bones tied to our root bones. So what I'd like to do is actually tie them to the mid channels. That way when we start to use the mid channel, we have some really nice sliding from this secondary bone. So this is actually really simple to do. We'll go ahead and use the mid channel and we'll tie into the secondary bone object, but we don't want to necessarily do a direct connection. We want to diminish the amount of control the mid channel will have so that we have a natural looking sliding effect. If it's a direct connection, we'll notice way too much control. The finger will basically be out of hand. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. We'll right click and choose wire parameters. That's going to be modified object, extra controls, custom parameters, and we'll grab the mid channel and we'll tie into the secondary bone, and that's going to be its y-axis. So from there, we'll simply go ahead and multiply this result by something very small. I would say 1/1000th of a percent. So now when we go ahead and connect in, no need for degrees to radians. We'll just go ahead and take a look at this. If we were to just close this out and start to use the mid channel, you'll notice we have some really nice sliding from this secondary bone. And that is going to, again, look really nice and natural when we skin and we start to animate the fingers. So it's these type of subtleties that really say a whole lot. So we're going to go ahead and continue that for the other sections. We already know the equation that we're using. Again, we're multiplying by 1/1000th of a percent. So when we get to the middle finger, it's the same way. We'd simply right click and choose wire parameters. It's going to be modified object, extra controls, mid, and we'll tie into the secondary bone. And it's going to be its y-axis. From there, again, it's going to be mid times 0.001, and we'll go ahead and connect. Let's test it out. So as we start to use the mid channel, we'll notice some really nice sliding. If you like a little bit more movement, you could always increase that value, but I'd recommend not increasing it too much because you might notice that the finger again is moving way too much, and this is meant to be more of a subtle feature. Alright, well that's going to be our last step. We don't need to do that for the thumb, of course, but for the ring and pinky fingers we need to take care of that, and then we'll need to make sure to rig the right hand. In the following lesson, we'll be ready to create our squash and stretch head rig.